All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Big Douglas Show. Day one of the draft is in the books, and help us break it down and look forward to tonight. Good friend of the show, Al Galdi. Al, how are you, bud?
Doing well, man. Appreciate you having me.
Always enjoy this 4 or 5 times a year. We chat like this, and we'll always have some fun. Hopefully, people learn some things. Now, I talked to you a week ago, maybe, about coming on doing this with me. I asked you then, did you have a preference? Maybe preference, no, but you thought maybe Drake had a bigger upside. The pick was Jayden Daniels. It feels like the loudest kept secret. What were your thoughts now that the pick's actually been made?
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. I think there's a lot to like about Jayden Daniels. I mean, I did prefer Drake May. I've made no secret of that. I've talked about that a lot. But I always kind of felt like there were a lot of things to like with all these guys. Like, I was never one of these people that was dead set on one and like despised the other. Like I thought that all three, Daniels, May, McCarthy, offered a lot. And a lot of this was just, what flavor of ice cream do you like the most? And I think there also was always an unknown with all this, which is how are these guys behind the scenes? And, there's a lot of that stuff that we don't know and that the team has access to. And so you sort of had to trust the decision makers. And I think that that's a big part of this, too. Like, if you feel really good about the hiring of Adam Peters and you trust Adam Peters and you like his track record, then I think he deserves the benefit of the doubt with something like this. And, you should sort of trust in his judgment. And that doesn't mean that you can't have your own opinion. But I think you have to approach this with a little bit of humility of we don't know what Peters knows. We don't see what Peters sees. So, I did prefer May. I think the concerns with Daniels have been more concerning than the concerns with May. But the fact that Peters took Daniels suggests to me that he's not as concerned by the concerns. And so if he's not, then that does make me feel better about Jayden Daniels. But I think there's a ton to like with Daniels. I think he has immense upside. I think he can be an elite quarterback. And it's just a matter of the team maximizing that potential and him reaching that potential. But he can be what we have been searching for decades, which is a true franchise quarterback. And it's nice to be able to say that.
It is, Al. And I'll tell you, I thought it was interesting. Peters was talking the other day about because he was still in San Francisco, how late he was to the process. They loved the process. He was late to it. So while I'll believe him when I say that they didn't know up until whatever it was, and that was interesting to say that it took him a couple of months longer to even get into the film because of the new job and moving and wrapping things up with San Francisco, how long he was there because of their success last year. I thought that was interesting. I also think it's interesting that it felt like this was going to be an analytics operation, and I'm not saying that it won't be, but it feels like the scouts and the analytics guys love Drake May. This didn't feel like an analytics decision.
No, it didn't. And it's interesting you say that because I've had the same thought, and I've talked about this on the podcast that, it's not a 100% divide, but the general sort of direction has seemed to be analytics people prefer May and more traditional scouting people prefer Daniels. And when you think about Adam Peters and also Lance Newmark, they are more traditional scouting people. Like if you had to put them in one bucket, you'd put them in the scouting bucket and not the analytics bucket. Although, it's not as simple as that. Like the good teams use both, and it's not about choosing one or the other. It's about, bringing the best of both and combining them. But yeah, if you went purely analytics, I think you probably would have gone with May. But that's okay. I mean, I'm a big analytics person. I make no secret of that. But, I also don't think that it has to be the thing that you abide by every time, 100% of the time. And like, you can't go in another direction. Like, it's not as simple as that. It's not meant to be that. So I think you can look at it in that way. I also would say this. It's not like the analytics can't stand Jayden Daniels. It's just that they really did prefer May. But from an analytics perspective, there's a lot of PFF stuff that is favorable to Jayden Daniels. There's a projection system that was developed, at least in part, by a big force in football analytics, Aaron Schatz's Cubase, that favored Daniels over May. So, there are aspects of analytics that did prefer Jayden Daniels. So, like I said, I think a lot of this is kind of what you prefer, what you believe in. You know, if you go by like the concerns, right? The big concern with May is the mechanics. The big concern with Daniels is the frame combined with the reckless running style. And so it's kind of like, okay, which one to you is more fixable? Which one to you is more bothersome? And there's an argument to be made for each one. And, you know, the fact that Peters was saying that kind of was Daniels all along, and they just went through the process to sort of confirm that, I think that tells you where Peters stands on which concerns were most worrisome. You know, there's also now this sentiment coming from multiple people that May wasn't even the second guy, that
That's right.
McCarthy was the second guy for the Commanders. So I think that's pretty interesting too. May, it seems like, was probably Washington's QB4 in all of this.
Yeah, and some of that makes a little bit of sense, I suppose, if you're looking at Adam Peters. To me, I can see where he could draw the line from McCarthy to Brock Purdy that they already had, maybe, you know, a Brock Purdy plus type thing. I'm excited about the Jayden Daniels pick. When is the last time a quarterback brought this much? What do you have to go back to 2012 for this much juice? I don't recall there being this kind of juice around the Haskins pick.
No. There was a lot of angst around the Haskins pick because it was being leaked like crazy that Dan Snyder forced the pick. So, yeah, I mean, look, there was excitement from people like me who were fans of him, Kirk Cousins, when he was doing well. But that's different from when he was picked. But like when he was doing well in 2015 and 2016, there was genuine excitement. But he was drafted in 2012, so that's a different conversation. Yeah, I think you have to go back to Robert. Now, I think there was more juice with Robert because there was this unanimous aspect to that of, you know, that draft was pretty cut and dry in terms of the perception of the quarterbacks. Luck was the QB1, Robert was the QB2. Now, it did not play out that way, but that's not the point. At the time, there was zero debate of who the Redskins should take it to. This time was different. I mean, there was a real conversation. And so because you had so many Commanders fans who wanted May and even some who wanted McCarthy, I don't think it was this like unanimous feeling of joy like you had in 2012. I also think, you know, we as a fan base are a bit more scarred and a bit more jaded than we were in 2012 because of what happened with Robert and because of, you know, everything that's happened with the team. So I think that plays into it too. I mean, I've heard from a lot of fans who are kind of like with Jayden Daniels, okay, but I'll see it when I believe it. And I get that. I do. But I also think it's okay to be excited. Like, I don't think you're a sap if you're excited about this. Like, I think it's okay to feel good about this, you know, with the understanding that it's not 100% and there are plenty of things that can go wrong and you have to be mindful of those things. But, you know, it is a new day with the new ownership and the new front office and a new coaching staff. I think that there is an infrastructure that is in place and that is being put in place by which a guy like Daniels can be maximized. I mean, that's one thing about the Robert thing. A lot of things went wrong, but in hindsight, it's so clear that the setup was not a setup by which you can truly maximize someone, right? You had an owner who befriended the quarterback, and that wrecked everything. You don't have that this time. And so if this doesn't work, I think it's not going to work because Daniels wasn't good enough. I think that's going to be the reason, as opposed to it doesn't work because, you know, Josh Harris became too buddy-buddy with Jayden Daniels or something like that.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. If you saw the clip where they called him, I think Harris, you don't know how they clip these things, but it felt like Harris said, "Congrats, you've earned it. We're ready to go." Like it was like 5 seconds between the owner. Now, I'm not suggesting that the owner played into who they picked, but I've got to imagine that the owner is excited about selling a lot of Jayden Daniel number 5 jerseys.
Well, I think he's very marketable for sure. I mean, I think any young quarterback is marketable to a point. And then if the guy is good, the guy is marketable. So like if they had taken May and May killed it, May would be really marketable. But there's no question with Jayden Daniels, because he's a dual threat guy, coming off a Heisman Trophy winning campaign, coming off really one of the best seasons any collegiate quarterback has had in recent years. I mean, I think the gold standard is Joe Burrow's 2019. This might be the second best collegiate season for a quarterback over the last, say, 5, 10, 15 years. So, yeah, there's a lot of marketability with Daniels. And, you know, another thing that stood out to me from Thursday night, I had found Daniels in interviews, press conferences to be very reserved and to not have said much. I thought he actually came out a little bit on Thursday night in that Zoom presser that he did, that virtual presser. And I thought there was more sort of oomph to the way he spoke. He seemed to genuinely be happy about being drafted by the Commanders. This stuff about him maybe not wanting to be here. He certainly did not come off that way on Thursday night. So I thought that was good. That he came off like someone with energy and who was happy to have been drafted by the Commanders. His mom did the left hand up thing, so you have that going on. So I think all of that can play into it. But as we all know, he's got to play well, and if he plays well, then people will take to him, and he will sell jerseys, tickets, etc. And if he doesn't play well, then it's a different conversation.
I thought after I saw that video of her mom, how long had they must have known that he was going to be a Commander? Have time to go out and find the song, learn the song, remember to sing the song. So very well done on her. But it did give me pause. Like, I wonder how long they knew he was going to be a Commander before they put all that together.
Well, that's what's funny is it's true that the team was not leaking stuff, but it's also true that this became like the worst kept secret in the NFL that the Commanders were going to take Daniels at 2. So I'm not sure how we should feel about this anymore. Of like, they did a good job of hiding this. I mean, did they? I don't know. I guess you could say they did a good job of hiding it, but also people were right in presuming that Daniels would be the pick. But it is kind of odd. Like, on the one hand, everyone is saying, and Peters even got asked about it at his post first round presser late night Thursday night, of wow, you guys really kept things under wraps. On the other hand, by the time we got to Thursday night, everyone expected them to take Jayden Daniels. It was like the biggest no-brainer in terms of predictions that were being put forth. So I find that to be kind of an odd juxtaposition.
And it was, because I was on the media call with Daniel Jeremiah early in the week, and he said he's known Adam Peters for a long time, and it felt like Drake May was an Adam Peters pick, but that if you had heard that they had a pick, that person would be lying because nobody knew anything. But by Wednesday, I mean, the Peter Schrager's of the world were willing to say, put my name on the fact Jayden Daniels is going to the Commanders. So to your point, I thought it was odd. I think they did a great job of not saying anything. It certainly didn't out loud come from there. But you're right, everybody knew.
Yeah, and that's fine at the end of the day. I mean, I think if you weren't going to trade back, if you're the Commanders, the value of keeping everyone guessing was lessened. Now, I think there is value in having other teams not certain of what you're going to do, just because it forces those other teams to expend energy on thinking about what you might do. But yeah, if they weren't going to trade down, and it sounds like that was never really part of the thought process, they could have probably been more open about it. But I think, generally speaking, it's a best practice to keep things under wraps. And, I think if you're Adam Peters and you're trying to set up a new front office, I think this is kind of a good test run of, do we have any leakers? Does anyone put anything out there? And the fact that nobody did, at least as far as we can tell, that speaks well for the staff that Peters has assembled, for those who have been held over from the Ron Rivera regime. And maybe this is kind of a test from Peters to see if he has any, as we like to say, stooges in the front office. They don't seem to have had that. They were not leaking stuff. So I think that's good. And, down the line, when there is something that they really want to keep under wraps, they have reason to believe that they can keep that under wraps.
I'll admit I was one of those guys that would have traded a fair amount of capital to move back into the first for one of those premier tackles. It sounds like they had Amarius Mims in with the group that went to Top Golf, and that they would have liked to get up there, but felt getting ahead of the Bengals just too expensive. The numbers aren't out. I'm sure at some point we'll hear sort of what it was like. If it took both seconds and a second next year, I understand why they didn't do it. If it was giving up 36 and 40, I think I would have done it for a guy like Mims. Lathan ended up going real early. Surprised they must not have been in on Guyton like some people thought. It sounds like it was Mims or bust there. Where were you, and how much would you have given up to get there?
Well, I think this actually is maybe where the analytics came in. So what analytics generally tell you about the NFL draft is you trade down, you don't trade up. Now, there's a caveat to that, and that is quarterback. So if you're getting a guy who you think can be a stud quarterback, trading up is fine, because nothing matters more than quarterback. But otherwise, if you're talking about other positions, it's a dangerous game to play to trade up. So I think you start with that. You then go to this. So there used to be the thing of, hey, if you trade back into the first round, there's actually added value to that because of the fifth-year option. That was part of the reason that trading back into the first round in 2019 to take Montez Sweat made sense. The fifth-year option now has changed to where it is now guaranteed for injury. So the
Right.
value of the fifth-year option from a club perspective is not what it was just a few years ago. Now, that's not to say that there isn't value in a fifth-year option. There is, but it's not as valuable as it was a few years ago. So then you have that. Then you have what I think is a pretty clear reality with offensive linemen, which is, yes, plenty of good ones come from first rounds, but a lot of good ones don't. And so you can get a good offensive lineman, even a good offensive tackle, via a non-first round pick. And, at the end of the day, I think if you're Peters, you go by your draft board. And if their board dictated not to trade up because whoever they might have wanted was gone, then I think you sort of put all of that together. And I was fine with them not trading back into the first round. Look, there isn't that left tackle on the roster right now who you feel great about. I understand that. But they know that, and I think this does kind of come back to giving these guys the benefit of the doubt. But just from a general NFL draft perspective, while yes, the Commanders had the ammunition to trade back into the first round, there were a lot of general principles that I think were pushing back against that. And so I'm okay with them having done that. Let's see what happens on Friday night. But I think there's still ample opportunity to get someone who can be a really good starting left tackle.
And to your point, this is where the draft essentially gets fun. As exciting as pick number 2 overall was for grinders like the Adam Peters of the world, having 5 picks tonight has got to be pretty exciting. And maybe they get back up into the second round tonight if they like. I understand the concept of always going back down, but a lot of picks this year to be able to move up and down the board. Which positions do you think are most important to get right tonight?
Well, I'm a big best player available person, so I think you let that be your guiding light. But I think the truth with the Commanders is they need help at just about every position. So
It's true. It's right out.
I don't think you have to get too caught up in BPA versus need. Like I think just about everything's a need, save for I guess quarterback. But look, I think we know the list by now: offensive tackle, corner, receiver, tight end. I mean, those are the big 4 that jump out. But I'm not against taking anyone at any spot. Another thing that analytics tells you is you deal with non-premium positions in free agency in terms of signing starters / key players. You use the draft to get the premium position guys. And so if you look at how they've kind of done this, free agency for the most part was spent on addressing non-premium positions. Now, it's not 100%. They did get edge defenders, but they didn't spend big money on those edge defenders. But they spent the real money. They got the key starters at spots like linebacker and safety, which in today's NFL are non-premium positions. Running back with Austin Eckler, non-premium position. Interior offensive line, Biotish and Allegretti, non-premium positions. So now you can start to address those premium spots. Already did quarterback, left tackle, premium spot, corner, premium spot. Receiver premium spot. So I think they're kind of set up nicely in that regard. And there's depth certainly at receiver in this draft. We know that. Offensive tackle is kind of tricky because obviously a lot of the good ones have been taken, but there still are praiseworthy offensive tackles remaining.
Patrick Paul, Roger Rosengarten, the kid from BYU. Sounds
Absolutely.
like I think the kid from Yale is still around.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're just going off like basic big boards that are out there, there are appealing people. And again, we don't know what they think. They might like someone who we haven't even heard of who they end up grabbing. So we'll see. But it is such a unique deal because, we had the RG3 trade, which took away multiple second round picks. We've had other trades that wiped out second round picks. You think like the Donovan McNabb trade. We know that the team's recent history with second round picks is not good, going back like 15 years. And so this is such a unique deal to have 2 high second round picks with this new regime. And then the 3 third round picks. So many day 2s of NFL drafts for Washington have been kind of ho-hum and obviously have not yielded nearly enough. This is something that is so special and unique and potentially going to be something that we look back on with great fondness. 5 day 2 picks, including 2 high second round picks. There's a lot of good that can be done on this Friday night.
The 36 and the 40, just having them so close there, really something amazing. I think I know what your answer will be to this, but I've got to know for the record, there is this notion that now that they have Jayden Daniels, they must trade for Brandon Ayuk. To me, Al, with the onslaught of 7-on-7 wide receivers, fast and furious every year, we're getting better and better, more NFL ready immediately. Route trees getting bigger and better. I don't know why you would ever in life sign up for somebody else's $20 million a year receiver and give them assets for it. I'm not in. No, thank you. What say you?
I think you have to really love the receiver to do that. I mean, we've seen receiver trades work out. See Tyreek Hill to the Dolphins, see A.J. Brown to the Eagles. But yes, for all of the reasons you just stated, it's not something you should do unless you really love the receiver and have real certainty that the guy is going to be great for you. Now, Ayuk is really good. He's young, he's durable, and we know that Peters knows Ayuk. So, there are reasons to champion the Commanders trading for this guy. There also, of course, is how you assess the Commanders' current receiving core, which to me, after Terry McLaurin, is a giant question mark. Like we all hope Dotson in 24 is what he was in 22, but he was not a good receiver in 2023. And there's no guarantee that that isn't the real Dotson as compared to 22. I hope that the 2022 Dotson is who we see this coming season, but, we don't know that. So, I think receiver is more of a need than maybe it gets credit for. But yeah, you're right. In the current NFL, there are so many good receivers who were taken on day 2s, even day 3s of drafts. And unless you just have extreme certainty that the guy who you're trading for is going to be great for you, I would be reluctant to do that, to give up assets, to pay the guy big money. I also think that there's a reality too of if you get good quarterback play, your receivers can be made to look good. We've mentioned Robert in 2012. Go back and look at the Redskins receiving core in 2012. Beyond Pierre Garçon, I mean, you're talking about Leonard Hankerson and Joshua Morgan and Aldrick Robinson, and yet these receivers put up good numbers, did good things. Why? Because the quarterback play was really good, the running game was really good. So there's something to be said for if you get the other stuff right, and the receiving core is just like competent, you can be just fine.
I've asked this repeatedly of guests over the last month or two from a variety of different places. Have you put a finger? Do you have an idea on what you think this offense will actually look like? Because we have guys from many different systems. Brian Johnson in from the Eagles, who worked very closely with Hurts. You have in or I'm missing him now, but the guy that came over from San Francisco, Lynn, who had been with the Chargers, and of course the guy at the very front, Kingsbury, with what was an air raid, who apparently it is not an air raid anymore. I say this quite often. One of the knocks on Cliff, and I'll continue to say it, was his inability to put together the play action and mirror that. Obviously, Lynn, very well versed in that. So a long-winded question about what you think the offense might actually look like.
Yeah, we all can take a guess. I don't think anyone can say anything with certainty. I don't know that the team itself can say anything with certainty. I think part of the idea in having Kingsbury and Johnson and Lynn may well be, let's have something by which we can sort of pivot in whatever direction ends up being best. Now, we know how it is with NFL offenses. They all end up being these mixes of a bunch of different stuff, right? It's kind of like, I don't know if you follow the UFC, but like back when the UFC started, you had like, this guy's a karate guy. This guy's a wrestler guy. This guy is a striker guy. Now, you can't be like that anymore. Everyone is good at everything because that's how it is. And if you're not good at everything, then you're going to get got, right? And so I think in the NFL now, you got to be able to do a bunch of different stuff. It's not about like, well, we're a passing team or we're a running team. Like, you have to be good at both. You have to be innovative and clever at both. You can't say, well, we're an under center team. Like, no, you have to be able to operate out of the gun because so many quarterbacks operate out of the gun in college. At the same time, you'd like to be able to diversify to where you can operate under center. And so like there are all these different principles. You got to find what you do best, but you want to be able to do things in a way that isn't so simplistic and in a way that can throw off defenses. I mean, knowing what we know about Kingsbury, right? I think there will be air raid principles in the offense. I know he doesn't like that label. I kind of understand why he said that because there is this like sensitivity to that label. People hear that label and they think that that means that you never run the ball. It's actually not true. If you know the history of the air raid, many air raid teams have had very efficient and successful and productive rushing offenses. Air raid doesn't mean you never run the football. Air raid also doesn't mean that you don't throw to tight ends. Like you can get very good tight end production in air raid offenses. We've seen that. So I think there's been sort of a manipulation of what air raid offense means. But yeah, I think the point you raise is a good one. And I think a lot of this too is what does Jayden Daniels adapt to most? So you can have an idea of what you want to do, but when you're doing these OTA and mini camp practices and training camp practices, what is Daniels taking to? What is he maybe not so good at? So I think this is going to be a process, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if what the offense is in week 1 is different from what the offense is in like week 8. I think there's going to be a feeling out process with all of this. I think the general rule is you as a coach adapt to the players. In this case, you as the coach adapt to the quarterback. It's not about force feeding your system on Jayden Daniels. You can have some basic principles you go by, but this is about you put a lot of stuff out there. You see what he takes to, you see what works, and then, you move on from that. And that is in a lot of ways, the way that like Dan Quinn has talked about stuff and Joe Witt Jr. too with the defense of like how they are approaching running this defense. You see what works, you take out what doesn't work, and you move forward. And I would hope that that's the case here with the offense. I think what's tricky with the offense is this. With the defense, we know Quinn and Witt have this lengthy history together. They're going to be on the same page. This is kind of a mishmash, right, of Kingsbury and Johnson and Lynn. And you got to think all three guys, because of where they've been and what they've done, have some ego, right? So are they all on the same page? Is everyone pulling in the same direction? I think that's the one thing to wonder about. But as long as they are on the same page, I think this could actually be a really fun offense because these are three really smart guys who know offense.
And in fairness to Kingsbury, by 2022, they were in 12 personnel and were running the ball all the time with Connor. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Zach Ertz led the team in receptions that year. So they had definitely switched things by the last year he was in Arizona.
Yeah, again, people hear air raid and they get all nervous, and they think, oh, it's going to be, throwing the football 60 times a game. And look, there have been variations of the air raid in college that have been like that. But on my podcast a few months ago now had on the godfather of the air raid, the guy who invented it, Hal Mummy. And he explained it. He's like, it's not necessarily what people think. Like running backs eat in air raid offenses. Tight ends eat in air raid offenses. So, and there's nothing too. Principles of the air raid now are in like every NFL offense. Seeing teams go 5 wide so often, spread out the field, like so much of that comes from the air raid. So I'm a big Kingsbury fan. I understand his record as a head coach was not exemplary, but he's not here to be a head coach. It's not about that. Look at what he's done with quarterbacks. Look at what he's done with offenses. He has a good track record, and I'm excited to see what he does with Jayden Daniels.
It's interesting. We had Chrissy Freud, who studied the air raid with Leach, and she said the same thing. If you look at the modern offense in the NFL, like 80% of those offenses are derived from an air raid concept that's been reworked. I want to quickly get over to the defense just a little bit before we get out of here. Al, you brought up Dan and Joe Witt. What kind of bump do the current cornerbacks on the roster get just from those guys being here? I'm thinking guys like Cooper DeJean still available, Cooley McKinstry still available that are maybe there at 36 because all the corners got pushed down the first round. Is it a priority to you? Maybe these guys are what we think they are and we'll get there with the new defensive staff.
Well, it can't be much worse than it was last year. I mean, the cornerback play last season, save for Kendall Fuller. Kendall had a good season, but beyond him, man, that was some of the worst cornerback play. I've ever seen. So I'd like to think just by happenstance the cornerback play will be better. But yes, Joe Witt's track record with cornerbacks is so impressive. Interceptions slash takeaways can be kind of fluky and year to year. This guy, though, every year he's in charge of a secondary, the secondary generates interceptions. So it's not just a fluky thing with Joe Witt Jr. Like, this guy's coaching is such that he extracts takeaways from his secondaries. This goes back to his time with the Packers. He did it with the Cowboys, and now hopefully he does that here. I expect St. Juice and Forbes to be better. They have to be better. The question is how much better. And I think that's what's tricky, right? Like, Jamin Davis was really bad in his rookie season. He has been better the last 2 seasons, but I don't think anyone would say that Jamin Davis has been like a really good linebacker the last 2 seasons. That's what I wonder about with Forbes. He was really bad last season. Him getting to a level of being okay in 2024 would be improvement, but is he going to ever be the really good corner he was drafted to be? That's the question. And maybe the answer is yes, I hope that it is, but we don't know. Additionally, in the current NFL, when you're in nickel so often, you need 3-4 starting caliber corners anyway.
Yes.
So I think corner is arguably the number one need on this football team. And so, yes, I think the team absolutely needs help at corner. Now, we in free agency saw them sign some like depth pieces, but in terms of like a real standout, like in terms of a legitimate CB1, I don't think you have that right now. St. Juice is talented, but off his season last year, you can't have great confidence in him as a true CB1, right? So can you potentially find that with one of these second-round picks on Friday night? I'd love to see that. But yeah, corner is a big deal. I think we've gotten to a point in the NFL where corner arguably matters more than, say, edge defender or any defensive line spot. I think that there's a case to be made for that now, especially with how quickly quarterbacks get rid of football. So corner is a big deal, and this team needs work there. That was probably the worst thing about the 2023 Commanders was the play of the secondary, the play of the cornerbacks in particular. It was putrid. Let's just be honest about it. It's got to be a lot better.
You mentioned something, and it kind of, I bet a lot of people watching will consider it a throwaway line, but the quickness by which the quarterback gets the ball out of his hands now is ruining the value of edge rushers. You're almost at a point where having D tackles is a better premium because a straight line gets you there faster. And if you're getting the ball out of the hands in under 3 seconds, good luck on edge rushers.
Absolutely. And, I think a lot of thought and conversation should be put into, and already has been put into, why the heck was it that Washington, with this all first-round pick defensive line, struggled so often on defense? And why was it that defensive line was never as good as it was set up to be? It always felt like the whole was less than the sum of the parts. How and why was that? Well, some of that was some of those players didn't play like they should, but some of that is the reality of the current NFL. Quarterbacks get rid of footballs quickly. So good luck generating sacks and generating pressures unless you're just like an all-world pass rush because of how quickly quarterbacks get rid of footballs. And so, yeah, it does negate defensive lines to a point. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have a really good defensive line, and it doesn't mean that those guys, those 4 first-rounders, didn't underachieve way too often, because they did. But, yeah, I think we have to rethink the way we look at defensive lines. The sort of standard go-to phrase for years was, football is won in the trenches, and it's won with line play offensively and defensively. Well, look, on offense, offensive line play still matters a ton, for sure. On defense, it's a little trickier now. Defensive line play matters. I'm not trying to say it doesn't, but I think you could make the case that cornerback play matters more, and this team needs work there.
Austin Eckler's on a 1-year deal. Is running back a position you just draft every year now?
I think so. I love the Eckler signing from a standpoint of they're paying him nothing. So if he gives them anything, it's a bonus. And I think he may well have something left in the tank. So, but yeah, running backs to me, you take them, you move them in, you move them out. And they have Eckler, they have Robinson, they have Chris Rodriguez Jr. So, they in theory have a running back room, but, you want depth and, it's not like Rodriguez is guaranteed a spot on the season opening 53-man roster, right? So to push him would be fine. And I think this team certainly could use, that prototypical, scat back, speed back, somebody like that. So zero issue with taking a back on certainly day 3.
And for those worried about tackle, I think it's important to remember, we didn't have Leno before the Bears. I mean, there's a lot of people getting
Right?
ready
Yeah.
coming up soon, like camp starts. So who knows what and who will be available. Al, more or less than the 5 picks tonight? Think they stick at 5, end up with more or less than 5?
I think they make 5 picks, but to the motivation for the question, there are many possibilities. So yeah, that is something to think about. But if I had to place a bet, I'd say they end up making the 5 picks, which will make it one of the busiest singular draft nights in Washington history, certainly since the draft went to the 3-night format in 2010. It's going to be a wild night. Thursday night was a big night, but actually wasn't that wild, right? They made the pick, and then that ended up being it. Friday night is going to be a much different animal with the 5 picks.
It'll be exciting. Al, you're the best. The podcast is the Al Galdi podcast, every day, Monday through Friday, available at 5 a.m. still.
Yes, oftentimes earlier. So
Oftentimes
it's with
earlier.
you when you wake up. That's how I like to phrase it.
Well, as you know, we appreciate your time when you come on, buddy. Always love chatting and talking ball with you.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you.